My name is Daniel Carter, and at 34 years old, I had just about everything I could have hoped for. I was the director of product development at Nexus Innovations, a rapidly growing tech company based in Seattle. For the past 10 years, I'd poured my heart into this place, starting as a junior engineer and working my way up through sheer determination and the desire to make an impact. I was proud of what I'd achieved. I'd helped build products that changed industries, secured multi-million-dollar deals, and helped transform Nexus from a small, scrappy startup into a company valued at over $1 billion. When I looked back on those years, it felt like I had earned every bit of my success. But while I was climbing the corporate ladder, my personal life wasn't as simple as it seemed. I'd been married to Emma for 5 years. We met in college, and together, we had built a life I thought was grounded in love and mutual respect. Emma was everything I had ever wanted: smart, beautiful, and ambitious. I admired her drive, but in hindsight, I should have paid more attention to what drove her. She always supported my career, celebrated my successes, and never seemed to stand in the way of my professional ambitions. I thought we were a team, but I started to realize there were things going on that I wasn't aware of. Emma was brilliant at managing her own career, but I never guessed that she might be playing a long game when it came to her family. Emma's younger brother, Ben, was the wild card in our lives. He was 28 years old, fresh out of business school with an MBA from a mid-tier university, and had spent the past few years hopping from one job to the next, with no real achievements to speak of. I always thought of him as a harmless, directionless guy who struggled to find his footing. He wasn't the kind of person who seemed destined for a big role in the tech world. But Emma had always been there for him, trying to make connections and support his career however she could. And I, maybe naively, didn't see it as a problem. I thought it was just Emma being a supportive sister. But things started to shift 3 weeks ago when Greg Foster, our 65-year-old CEO, announced a major restructuring. He'd been preparing for retirement, and we all assumed it was time for a successor to step up. The speculation around the office was palpable. Who would take the reins? Greg was well-liked and had built the company from the ground up, so everyone was on edge about the changes. But nothing could have prepared me for the bombshell Greg dropped during that meeting. "Good morning, everyone," Greg said with a grin, standing in front of the boardroom. "I'd like to introduce our new head of operations." He paused for effect. "Ben Carter." I remember the way my stomach dropped as I glanced around the room, trying to process what I had just heard. Ben? My brother-in-law, who had barely held down a job in his life? How could this even be happening? I had worked my entire adult life to get where I was, and now this kid, with little experience, was suddenly appointed to a role that was critical to the company's future? I looked at the faces around the room, and I could see it, the shock, the disbelief. No one spoke up. No one questioned it. Greg had made it clear. Family connections were more important than qualifications. I tried to hold it together as Ben, clearly relishing the moment, grinned and walked around the table, shaking hands with everyone. When he got to me, I could feel his grip tighten. "Family first, right, Daniel?" he said, his voice almost too confident. I forced a smile. "Welcome aboard, Ben," I muttered. The next 2 days were a blur of chaos. Ben started making decisions left and right without consulting anyone. He restructured teams, canceled meetings, and sent out directives that nobody had agreed to. People were starting to talk. Whispers in the halls, confusion in meetings. But the worst part wasn't the bad decisions or the confusion. It was his attitude. Ben acted like he had all the answers, insulting longtime employees and treating them like they were beneath him. And worst of all, my relationship with the people I had worked so hard to build respect with was beginning to crack. How could I keep my head up, knowing I was connected to this guy who had no idea what he was doing? I was trying to focus on the work that mattered. There was an important meeting coming up with Charles Bennett from Crescent Capital, a potential $200 million investment that could fuel Nexus's next phase of growth. I had been working on this deal for months, and I couldn't afford to let the mess Ben was creating distract me. But I had no idea just how much everything was about to unravel. The day started like any other, but everything shifted when I grabbed my coffee and started walking toward the conference room for my meeting with Charles Bennett. My mind was still focused on the numbers, the strategy, the deal. I'd been preparing for this for months, and it was a critical moment for Nexus. If we landed this investment, we could expand into new markets and continue our rise to becoming an industry leader. But as I rounded the corner to the executive hallway, that's when it happened. I wasn't looking where I was going, too focused on the notes in my hand. And that's when I collided with him. Ben, in his freshly pressed suit, a look of arrogance plastered on his face. The coffee in my hand sloshed, spilling across his chest, and a good amount of it soaked into the pristine fabric of his expensive suit. The look on his face was a mixture of shock and fury. My heart dropped as I stared at him, my brain scrambling to come up with some kind of apology. "Are you kidding me?" Ben shouted, louder than I expected. The entire hallway seemed to freeze at the sound of his voice. Heads turned, and I could feel the eyes of the office workers on me. I looked down at his suit and immediately saw the damage. It wasn't like I hadn't noticed it before, but the full impact of what had just happened hit me all at once. "Do you know how much this suit cost?" I stepped back, trying to assess the situation. "Ben, I didn't mean to. It was an accident," I stammered, hoping to defuse the situation. "I wasn't looking where I was going. I'll pay for the dry cleaning." But Ben wasn't having it. He was red in the face now, his hands clenching into fists. "No, this is a custom suit, one of a kind. This is a $3,000 suit. You think you can just ruin it and walk away like it's nothing?" I could see the disbelief on his face as his anger grew. I hadn't meant to spill the coffee. I hadn't even seen him coming, but here he was, lashing out. The entire situation felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "Ben, it's just coffee. It'll come out in the wash. But right now, I need to get to my meeting with Charles. We're on the verge of a major investment here, and I can't keep him waiting." I was hoping that would calm him down, but the look in his eyes told me I was wrong. He stepped closer, his breath hot with anger. "You think your meeting is more important than me? Do you think I'm some kind of joke? I'm the head of operations now. That means I outrank you, Daniel. You don't get to disrespect me like this." His words were sharp, cold. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't about the suit. This was about something deeper, something I couldn't quite understand. I had known Ben long enough to know that his ego was fragile, but this was something else entirely. I couldn't believe what was happening. Before I could respond, he leaned in closer, his voice lowered, but it felt like it could have shattered the walls around us. "You're fired." My world stopped. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. "What?" I whispered. "You heard me," Ben spat. "You're fired. Effective immediately. I don't need to put up with this kind of disrespect. Pack your things, Daniel." He pulled out his phone, likely texting security to escort me out. I stood frozen, trying to process the words that had just left his mouth. I felt like I was sinking, unable to grasp the reality of the situation. This was Ben, who had no experience, no leadership background, no idea how to manage a team, and now he was firing me over a coffee spill. For a moment, I considered arguing, pleading with him, trying to make him see reason, but I knew deep down he wasn't interested in hearing any of it. This wasn't about the suit or the coffee or the meeting. This was about power, about control. And Ben, for some reason, had decided to wield it over me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity before I finally said, "Fine, if that's how you want to handle it." My voice was cold, more controlled than I felt. "I'll go." The look on his face was one of surprise. He expected me to fight back, to beg for my job, but I was beyond that. I turned and walked to my office, packing up what little I had left of my life at Nexus. Sarah, a senior manager who had worked with me for years, followed me in silence. When I opened the drawer to grab my personal items, she stopped me. "Daniel, this is insane," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just let him do this. He can't fire you over a coffee spill." But I knew better. "It's done, Sarah. He's in charge now, and I don't think Greg will back me up. This is his choice." Sarah's face paled, and for a moment I could see the concern in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" I couldn't answer right away. I looked around the office that had been my home for so many years, the place where I had built my career. It was hard to believe it was all ending this way. "I don't know yet," I said quietly, "but maybe it's time to move on." The walk to the elevator was surreal. I was escorted by security, the same people who had greeted me every morning for the past decade, now walking me out like a criminal. When we reached the lobby, I saw Charles Bennett standing near the windows waiting for me. I was supposed to meet him for our investment discussion, but now everything had changed. Charles looked up as I walked past. "What's going on?" he asked, confusion on his face. I forced a smile. "I just got fired." As I walked past Charles, the security guards trailing behind me, I could see the confusion on his face turn into concern. He had been a major part of our potential $200 million investment in Nexus. The meeting we had scheduled was supposed to be a pivotal moment in my career, a moment where I would pitch Nexus's next big step and secure the funds that would fuel our growth. Now I was being escorted out like a criminal. This wasn't how I'd imagined my day would go. Charles stepped forward, glancing between me and the security guards. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. I could hear the edge of confusion in his tone, and I didn't blame him. How could I explain what had just happened? How could I explain that my brother-in-law, Ben, had just fired me over a coffee spill, an accident that could have been fixed with a simple dry cleaning bill? I smiled faintly, he trying to keep my composure. "I just got fired," I said, my voice strangely calm despite the turmoil swirling inside me. Charles blinked, his jaw dropping in shock. "You're kidding, right?" he asked, as though he hadn't heard me correctly. "I wish I were," I replied dryly. The new head of operations, Ben Carter, decided that I was expendable. Apparently, a coffee spill was enough to end my tenure here. I let out a short laugh, though it was devoid of humor. It was all so ridiculous, and yet, here I was, the product of years of hard work and dedication, unceremoniously shown the door by someone who couldn't even manage a team properly. Charles stood there, shaking his head. "This doesn't make sense. You've been with Nexus for what, 10 years? You built this place from the ground up, and now? This?" "Yeah," I said, a bitter edge creeping into my voice. "It's not about the coffee spill. It's about Ben wanting to flex his power. He got appointed to a position he's not qualified for, and now he's taking it out on me. His new position means he outranks me, and he thinks he can fire me over some minor accident." Charles sighed, visibly frustrated. "I've been in business a long time, Daniel, and I've seen my fair share of stupid moves. But this takes the cake. I'm pulling our investment." He pulled out his phone, already scrolling through it. "I'm calling my team right now. This is the kind of thing that doesn't just destroy careers. It destroys companies." I didn't know whether to feel grateful or stunned. I had worked tirelessly to build relationships with investors like Charles, and to see it all unravel because of one man's overblown ego was nothing short of infuriating. I had known that losing the Blackstone deal would have consequences, but I never thought it would spiral this quickly. Ben had just single-handedly torpedoed everything we had worked for, and yet here I was, standing in the lobby, my entire career crumbling around me. Charles dialed a number and began speaking in low tones, his voice tight with anger. "Yes, David, it's Jonathan. I need you to pull the Ashford deal immediately. Yes, I mean it. No more negotiations. I'll explain later, but the deal is dead." His eyes met mine as he ended the call, his expression grim. "Done. I just told my team to halt everything. Nexus doesn't deserve this investment. Not anymore." I swallowed hard, trying to process everything. "So that's it? You're pulling the deal?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Charles nodded, his face hardening. "Absolutely. Nexus had potential, but now this? I'm not going to put my money into a company that can't even handle basic leadership, let alone a multi-million-dollar deal. I saw you as the future of this company, Daniel. Without you, it's a sinking ship." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Everything I had worked for, all the late nights, the relentless pursuit of growth, the partnerships I had built, everything was gone. I couldn't even believe how quickly it had all unraveled. One impulsive decision, one petty act of revenge from Ben, and it was over. The company was spiraling toward collapse, and I had been swept up in the chaos. "I'm sorry, Daniel," Charles said, his tone softer now. "You didn't deserve this. But trust me, I've seen this kind of thing happen before. Companies go down in flames because of power plays like this. It's a damn shame." I nodded numbly, trying to hold myself together. I knew that there was no going back, that my future with Nexus was over. I had spent years building that company, only to see it destroyed by the incompetence of someone who had no business running the show. But there was no time to dwell on it. "So, what's next for you?" Charles asked, after a moment, breaking the silence. His voice was genuine, as though he truly cared about what happened to me next. I looked at him, feeling a strange sense of calm settling over me. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm not going to let this define me. Maybe it's time to move on to something new, something better." Charles seemed to consider this for a moment before speaking again. "You know, I might have an opportunity for you. It's not the kind of thing I usually offer, but there's a small tech company called Tech Forward. They're looking for someone to lead their product development and strategy. They've got a great team, and the potential is huge. If you're interested, I can make a call for you. I trust you, Daniel." I was surprised by the offer, but it didn't take long for me to make up my mind. "I'm interested," I said, feeling a spark of hope for the first time that day. Charles smiled. "I'll set something up. Let's talk more over lunch." After Charles made the call to Tech Forward, I had a few hours to kill, so we decided to grab lunch at a quiet spot across the street. I had no idea where this would lead, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. I'd been at Nexus for over a decade. My whole adult life had been defined by that company. And now, in the span of just a few hours, it had all fallen apart. It was surreal. It didn't matter how many late nights I'd put in, how many deals I'd sealed, or how much progress I'd made. Ben's power play had shattered it all. As we sat down at the restaurant, I tried to settle into the new reality. Charles kept glancing at his phone, probably double-checking the plans he had for the rest of the day. I, on the other hand, could barely focus on the conversation. My mind kept going back to what had happened that morning, how everything had gone south so quickly, how a single moment of arrogance had cost me everything I had worked for. I had been fired for something as insignificant as a coffee spill. And now, Nexus was crumbling because of that same person's incompetence. "So, Tech Forward," I said, trying to shift my focus to something more productive. "What's the deal with them? I don't know much about the company." Charles leaned back in his chair, taking a sip of water before answering. "Tech Forward's a bit different from the usual Silicon Valley startups. They're small, only about 50 employees right now, but their technology is ahead of the curve. They're focused on cloud security, which is a hot sector. But the thing is, they don't know how to scale. They've got this incredible product, but they've struggled to build the right partnerships to grow their market share. That's where you come in." I nodded, intrigued. "I see. So they need someone to help grow the company?" Charles smiled, leaning in slightly. "Exactly. They need someone who knows how to navigate the tech landscape, build relationships with the right investors, and lead the product development strategy. Someone who understands the big picture. You were the guy at Nexus, Daniel. I'm not just offering you this because I know you. It's because you've got the experience and the drive to take something small and turn it into a powerhouse." His words stung in a way I didn't expect. I had always prided myself on being a creator, on building something from the ground up. But at Nexus, I had been one cog in a much larger machine. Now here was someone offering me the chance to take the reins of something that could actually succeed. I had always imagined this kind of opportunity would come along when I was ready, when I had built the right network, the right resume. But here it was, dropped in my lap after everything had fallen apart. It felt almost too easy. "What kind of role are we talking about here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though part of me was already picturing what this could look like. "Chief Product Officer. You'd be responsible for leading the product development team, overseeing the partnerships, and making sure the company's technology aligns with its vision. You'll be in charge of scaling Tech Forward's product and technology portfolio, working directly with the CEO to set the strategy for the future. It's a big role. They need someone with your vision." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what he was saying. The reality of it started to sink in. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to reinvent myself, to do something bigger than I had at Nexus, to prove that I could take a company that had potential and turn it into something massive. No more dealing with corporate politics. No more being tethered to a company that was being run into the ground. This was my chance to build something real. Okay, I said after a pause. I'm in. Let's make this happen. Charles looked pleased, as though he had expected nothing less. I thought you'd say that. I'll set up a meeting with Tech Forward CEO Jennifer Walsh for this afternoon. She's expecting you. You'll like her. She's sharp and knows exactly where she wants to take the company. I'm looking forward to it, I replied, feeling a shift in my chest. It wasn't the immediate rush of excitement I would have expected. Instead, it was a calm realization that I was about to turn the page. No more looking back. It was time to move forward. The meeting with Jennifer Walsh went even better than I had hoped. When I walked into her office later that afternoon, I was immediately struck by her no-nonsense attitude. She was 42, sharp as a tack, and had clearly built her company with her own two hands. Tech Forward was small, but its potential was enormous. The team was innovative, and they had already started attracting attention in the industry. Jennifer had been looking for someone to lead the charge on scaling the product and the company as a whole. She had been waiting for someone like me, someone who could take her vision and make it reality. She was upfront about the challenges Tech Forward faced: lack of market penetration, difficulty securing long-term partnerships, and the need to refine their product for mass adoption. But she was also optimistic about what could be accomplished. I could see the passion in her eyes, the determination that matched my own. It felt like I was talking to someone who saw the big picture, someone who wasn't afraid to roll up her sleeves and get to work. When the conversation turned to the role, Jennifer didn't sugarcoat things. "This won't be easy," she said, "but I believe you're the right person to help us get where we need to go." "I'm up for the challenge," I said, my voice steady now. For the first time all day, I felt something other than the weight of what I had lost. I felt hope, real, tangible hope. By the end of the meeting, we had agreed on the terms, and I was officially offered the position of Chief Product Officer. Jennifer wanted me to start as soon as possible. I didn't need to think twice. I accepted the offer, ready to leave the chaos behind me and start something new, something that would be mine to build. I had no idea where this would take me, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I was excited about the future. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to redefine who I was. And that was something I wasn't going to let slip through my fingers. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Everything had changed so suddenly. Just a few days ago, I was at Nexus, walking into meetings and building the future of the company. Now I was walking out the door for good, leaving behind not only my career, but also the life I had built around that place. I'd been fired, then swiftly offered a new role at Tech Forward. The contrast was jarring, but there was a sense of relief in it. As much as I had invested in Nexus, I had to admit it had become clear to me that the company I had helped build was no longer the place I had believed in. The corporate politics, the nepotism, the power struggles, all of it had drained me. It was time to move on, and Tech Forward, with its fresh challenges and ambitious goals, felt like the right place to rebuild. I spent the next few days packing up my life. I cleared out my apartment, putting away things I had collected over the years, personal mementos, photos from events, trophies, and the occasional piece of art I had acquired on a whim. I was letting go of the last ties to a world that no longer served me. As I sorted through my things, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led to this point. There was no denying the bitterness of the situation, but it wasn't just about the way things had ended at Nexus. It was about realizing how much I had given to a company that had, in the end, been willing to throw me away so quickly. And it wasn't just about the coffee spill. It was about power, control, and ego, and I was the casualty of it all. I left behind the life I had in Seattle, packing up my car with the essentials. It was strange, but in some way, it felt like I was shedding old skin. There was no room for regret, at least not yet. I wasn't going to let a company built on nepotism define me, nor would I let a relationship that had been tainted by manipulation keep me stuck. Emma had tried to reach out a few times, calling and texting, but I hadn't responded. After everything that had happened, I knew I needed space, and I knew that our marriage, built on shaky ground, couldn't survive the storm that had broken it apart. The truth was, I wasn't angry at Emma. Not anymore. I had been disappointed, yes, but the truth was I couldn't be mad at her for wanting what she thought was best for her brother. I was angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. The next morning, I arrived at Tech Forward's office to start my new role. The company was smaller than Nexus, but the energy was different, more authentic, more driven by the vision than by the politics. I met with Jennifer Walsh, the CEO, and we discussed the road ahead. She was eager to get started, and I could feel her excitement about building something great. It was refreshing to work with someone who wasn't bogged down by corporate games. Jennifer knew what she wanted and was willing to take risks to get there. It wasn't long before I was diving into the work. The first few weeks were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and late nights. Tech Forward had a solid foundation, but there was so much work to be done. We had to refine the product, expand our customer base, and build strategic partnerships. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in the driver's seat. This wasn't about appeasing board members or playing the corporate game. It was about vision, passion, and execution. The kind of work I thrived in. I began meeting with potential clients, crafting strategies to attract investors, and streamlining the development process. My team was smaller than the one I had at Nexus, but they were motivated, talented, and ready to work hard. We didn't have the resources of a company like Nexus, but we had something more valuable, a shared commitment to the future. Every decision I made had a direct impact, and I could feel the difference. There was no one hovering over my shoulder, no power-hungry individuals trying to take control. This was my chance to build something meaningful, to make decisions that would drive the company forward, and that feeling was exhilarating. Despite the chaos that had unfolded with Nexus, I realized that what had seemed like the worst thing that could happen to me had turned out to be the catalyst for change. It was hard at first, the transition from a life that had been so stable and predictable to something entirely new. But it didn't take long before I felt the momentum building. The work was challenging, yes, but it was also fulfilling in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I was doing what I had always set out to do, building a company, a culture, a product that could make an impact. I had no idea what the future held for Tech Forward, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited about it. As I sat at my desk late one evening, reviewing a potential partnership proposal, I realized that I was exactly where I needed to be. The mistakes of the past, the disappointments, the betrayals, they had all led me here. And here, in this moment, I felt something that had been missing for a long time: purpose. The weeks at Tech Forward flew by in a blur of meetings, presentations, and late-night brainstorming sessions. I had to remind myself often just how far I had come. From the chaos at Nexus to this new chapter, it felt like I was finally getting a fresh start. The transition hadn't been easy. Shifting from a massive corporate structure to a small, fast-paced startup required a change in mindset. But there was a freedom here that I hadn't realized I'd been craving. At Tech Forward, my decisions mattered. Every step we took felt like we were building something real, and the impact of our work was tangible. I wasn't just a cog in the machine anymore. I was helping to shape the direction of the company. Tech Forward had the potential to disrupt the market, and I was determined to make that happen. But we were up against some major challenges. The company's cloud security technology was innovative, but it hadn't yet gained the kind of traction it deserved. We needed to refine the product, prove its value to investors, and build a customer base from the ground up. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, but I was ready for it. I spent the first few weeks immersing myself in the technology, understanding its strengths and weaknesses, and working closely with the development team to identify areas for improvement. I wasn't just leading from the top. I was rolling up my sleeves and getting involved in the nitty-gritty details. There was no room for complacency. Every day, we had to push ourselves harder, think smarter, and move faster. But the energy at Tech Forward was unlike anything I had experienced before. People believed in what we were building, and that belief fueled the work. One of the biggest hurdles we faced was securing a key partnership. Without the right backing, it would be nearly impossible to scale our operations. We were in talks with several potential partners, but no one was biting. That's when I realized that the problem wasn't with the product. It was with how we were selling it. Our pitch wasn't resonating. We were focusing too much on the technical details, the features, and the intricacies of our product without enough attention on the problem it solved. Investors and clients didn't care about the algorithms or the code. They cared about how our solution could make their businesses safer, more efficient, and more profitable. I spent hours refining our pitch, focusing less on the tech specs and more on the real-world applications of our solution. I worked closely with the marketing team to reframe our messaging, making sure we were addressing the pain points of our target market. By the end of the week, we had a new deck, a new approach, and a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to go out there and sell this thing. The first presentation with the revamped pitch went better than I could have hoped. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. And then something incredible happened. A major player in the industry, one that had been on the fence about partnering with us, expressed interest in moving forward. They saw the value in what we were doing, and they were willing to invest in our vision. We were finally getting the recognition we deserved. It was a major win, but I knew it was just the beginning. This was a step in the right direction, but there was still so much to do. We needed more partnerships, more customers, and most importantly, we needed to prove that we could execute. Tech Forward was on the map now, but we had to keep proving ourselves every single day. As the weeks turned into months, things began to take shape. The momentum we had been building started to pay off. We secured more partnerships, expanded our customer base, and began attracting the attention of more investors. The company was growing, and I was growing with it. It wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about the team we were building and the culture we were creating. The people at Tech Forward were driven by a shared mission, and that was something I hadn't felt at Nexus in years. Through all of this, I couldn't help but think back to the moment when I was fired. That moment had shattered everything I thought I knew about my career, about my future. But now, looking back, I could see that it had been the catalyst for change. I had been forced to step outside my comfort zone, to take risks, to do something that scared me. And in doing so, I had found something better. I wasn't just building a company, I was building a life that was truly my own. I could see the future now, clearer than I ever had before. There were still challenges ahead, no doubt, but I was ready for them. Tech Forward wasn't just another job. It was a chance to make a real impact, to be a part of something that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I could say that I was excited about the future. I knew I wasn't alone in this journey. I had a team behind me, a team that believed in what we were doing. And together, we were going to take this company to new heights. The road ahead was long, but I was ready to walk it. No more looking back. The future was right in front of me, and I was going to make the most of it. As Tech Forward continued to gain traction, the challenges we faced only grew in complexity. But with each hurdle, I found myself more confident in our ability to overcome it. The early days had been about figuring out what worked and what didn't, refining the product, rethinking the pitch, and learning how to communicate the value of what we offered. Now it was about scaling, expanding, and making sure we didn't lose sight of the core mission that had brought us this far. By now, we had established solid partnerships with key players in the industry, and our product was starting to gain real recognition. I could feel the momentum building. Our technology was being implemented in ways we hadn't anticipated, and companies were beginning to see the value in what we were offering. The market was catching up to us, and we were in the right place at the right time. But as we grew, the pressure mounted. It was one thing to have a successful product in a small market, but it was another thing entirely to scale it across a larger, more competitive space. We needed to make sure we didn't lose the culture and drive that had made Tech Forward so special. One afternoon, Jennifer called me into her office to discuss our next steps. We've been approached by several investors looking to back us in a bigger round. It's a huge opportunity, she said, her voice filled with that quiet intensity I had come to respect. But it's going to take more than just a great product to pull this off. We need to position ourselves as a leader in this space, not just another startup hoping to get lucky. Her words struck a chord. I had been thinking a lot about our position in the market And I knew that this was a make or break moment for us. Tech Forward had the technology, the team, and the vision, but we needed the right resources to really scale. That meant finding the right investors who understood what we were doing and would support us through the next phase of growth. We spent the next few weeks preparing for meetings with potential investors, refining our pitch, identifying our key metrics, and preparing answers to questions we hadn't even thought to ask. It was exhausting, but it felt like a necessary step. This was the moment when we would either prove that we were ready for the big time or risk being left behind by bigger, better-funded companies. The day of the investor pitch was one of the most nerve-wracking of my career. I stood in front of a room full of investors, each one with a skeptical look on their face, wondering if we had what it took to deliver. As I spoke, I couldn't help but think back to the days at Nexus, when I had been one of those corporate drones, climbing the ladder and playing the game. That world felt so far away now. This was different. This wasn't about appeasing anyone or kissing the right ass. It was about building something real, something that mattered. When I finished, I felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. But I knew this was just the beginning. I had presented our company's story, our vision, and our plan for the future. Now it was in their hands. Jennifer and I exchanged a brief glance, a silent acknowledgement of the weight of what we had just done. We didn't know how the investors would respond, but we had given them everything we had. It felt like the first real test of everything we'd worked for. Over the next few days, we waited. The silence was unbearable. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, hoping it was the call we had been waiting for. Then, on the third day after the pitch, I got the news I had been hoping for. The investors had decided to move forward with us. They were willing to back Tech Forward with a significant investment, one that would enable us to expand our team, refine our product, and push into new markets. The moment I received that call, I felt like I could finally exhale. It wasn't just a win for the company. It was a win for everyone who had believed in Tech Forward from the beginning. The team, Jennifer, and I had been building something from the ground up, and now we had the resources to take it to the next level. It felt like we had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The next few months were a blur of expansion. We hired new talent, onboarded new clients, and continued to build the product to meet the demands of our growing customer base. It was chaotic, but it was the kind of chaos that felt necessary, the kind of fast-paced energy that makes startups thrive. But throughout all of it, I kept thinking about how far I had come. From being fired over a coffee spill at Nexus to standing at the helm of a company that was truly going places, it felt like I had been given a second chance, one I wasn't going to waste. The person I was when I left Nexus seemed like a different version of me, someone I no longer recognized. This new chapter, this new life, it was mine to define. And with each passing day, I became more and more certain that I had made the right choice. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about building something I could be proud of, something that would last. Tech Forward wasn't just a company. It was the result of everything I had learned, every mistake I had made, and every decision that had led me to this point. And as I stood there, looking out at the team we had built, I knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more ahead of us, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take us. Months passed, and the momentum at Tech Forward kept building. With the new investment secured, we pushed harder than ever to refine our product, expand our reach, and solidify our place in the market. The small, tight-knit team we had cultivated was growing, but the energy that had fueled our success from the beginning remained. We weren't just a tech company anymore. We were a force to be reckoned with. And every day, I could feel the excitement and urgency that came with that. I had always prided myself on my ability to lead, to create something out of nothing, but this was different. This wasn't just about strategic vision or partnerships anymore. It was about the people. The team I worked with now was everything. They were passionate, driven, and smart, and they reminded me daily that building a company wasn't just about technology. It was about creating an environment where people could thrive, where everyone could contribute to the vision, and where hard work was rewarded. Despite the early victories, the pressure was relentless. We were constantly working to stay ahead of our competitors, refining our product, seeking new customers, and making sure we stayed in front of the pack. I felt the weight of it all, especially as the stakes grew higher with each successful deal and every new round of investment. But unlike my time at Nexus, I wasn't drowning in a sea of corporate politics. There were no power struggles or hidden agendas. It was just us, focused on the task at hand, pushing forward. Then one day, I got an email that threw everything into perspective. It was from Jonathan Reeves, the investor who had pulled the Blackstone deal from Nexus. He had been following TechForward's progress from afar and wanted to meet. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Jonathan had been the one to witness my public firing, the one who had pulled out of the Blackstone deal, and now he wanted to talk. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew one thing for certain. This was a moment I couldn't ignore. We arranged to meet at a cafe near the office, and when I walked in, I spotted Jonathan right away. He was sitting at a table, coffee in hand, looking as calm and collected as I remembered. When he saw me, a slight smile crossed his face. He stood up and extended his hand. "Daniel, it's good to see you again," he said, his voice warm but measured. I shook his hand, sitting down across from him. "Good to see you too, Jonathan. It's been a while." He nodded. "I've been watching what you've been doing at TechForward. I have to say, I'm impressed. You've really taken the ball and run with it." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded. I wasn't doing this for recognition. I was doing it because it was the right thing to do for the company and the team. But there was something spying about hearing that from someone who had witnessed my lowest point. "I've been following your progress," Jonathan continued, "and I think you're on the right track. TechForward has a real shot at being something special. I've also been thinking about the opportunities for collaboration between your company and others in our portfolio." That caught my attention. "What kind of collaboration are you thinking about?" Jonathan leaned in slightly, his voice lowering just enough for it to feel confidential. "Let's just say there's a chance for us to accelerate your growth. We've been talking about a potential merger with one of our other companies in the security space. It's a strategic move, and it could help you expand even faster. The infrastructure, the resources, everything you need to scale quickly." I sat back, letting his words sink in. A merger? It was an incredible opportunity, but it came with risks. A merger meant giving up some control, making compromises, and navigating a new set of challenges. But it also meant a shot at becoming a dominant player in the industry. "I'll be honest," I said after a pause. "That's a big decision. It's tempting, but I need to think about it. The team here, they've worked so hard to build this, and I don't want to lose the spirit of what we've created just for the sake of growth." Jonathan nodded. "I get it, and I respect that. It's a lot to consider. But the offer is there. Think about it, Daniel. TechForward is at a crossroads. This could be the opportunity to take it to the next level." We talked for a while longer, discussing the potential benefits and challenges of such a move. By the end of our conversation, I had a lot to think about. Jonathan made it clear that he wasn't pushing me into anything, but the offer was on the table. As I left the cafe, my mind was spinning. A merger. It felt like the kind of opportunity I had dreamed about when I was at Nexus, the kind of chance that could take everything to the next level. But it also felt like a gamble, one that required careful consideration. I wasn't just making this decision for myself. I was making it for the team that had been with me from the start. We had built something together, and I wasn't going to let that go without a fight. As I walked back to the office, I realized that this moment, this decision, was a culmination of everything I had gone through, from being fired over a coffee spill to sitting in a cafe with an investor who saw potential in what we were building. It was surreal. I had spent so long trying to prove myself, but now I realized something important. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about building something real, something that mattered. And no matter what came next, I knew that I had already built that.